All right, I'm going to review some Photoshop typography techniques, and I'm going to use this little image here of Photoshop concept study that we've used to do another activity. I'm just going to turn off some of these layers that don't matter right now to look at the text layers. So a couple of things. First off, make sure that you are in the Essentials workspace. That's Window Workspace Essentials. And if your panels are all out of whack, you can hit Reset Essentials and it'll do this. And then, of course, I like to close these down because I'm on a smaller screen right now than normal. Layers panel is right here. And we're going to need to use the character panel in just a minute. But we'll get to that using the type tool. So right here we have the type tool. There's horizontal and vertical type. Horizontal is your normal type tool. And if you just click and right there, just click on there, then that's going to give you a cursor, and then you can just start typing. So I just typed the word typing. A nice little hint is once you type things, you can press Control-A while you're inside there to select all of the text that's been typed, and that's a nice easy way to highlight words. And then of course you can just change your font size or whatever. So up here we have the font, and on the newer version here of Photoshop, it is searchable. You can also look for fonts that are similar to fonts. So on the new version, you can actually type in something, I don't know what I'm typing, but Gothic, for instance. The old versions, if you typed Gothic, it had to start with Gothic. And now the new versions, it can be anywhere in the name of the font. So that's kind of cool. There's also this one here, which are similar fonts. So if you have a font selected and you click Show Similar Fonts, then it will try to find fonts that are similar to the font that you currently have. So just know that that little button is there too. And you could also favorite fonts now. So if there are certain fonts you really like, you can favorite them to make them easier to access. So anyway, this second drop down, depending on the font, you may not have anything. Some of the more built-in fonts, you're going to find some things that have this. This is how you access alternative variations of a font. I'll use Arial because that's a common one. If you click on the drop down, you have regular Arial, which is plain Arial, but there's also Arial Narrow and Arial Black. And if you use, Microsoft Office, in Word, you're used to seeing the two names, Arial Narrow, Arial Black. Well, if there's versions of a font, then they come under this little subversion here, this little button. So some fonts, when you download them, have an italic and a bold version, and those are going to be there. Here's your font size. Again, you can use the drop down. You can type in the box, or you can point to the little TT, which is what I do, and slide and drag. This has to do with your anti-aliasing and how they display on the screen, and then your alignment and color. Now here, of course, is your warping of text, and you can choose the type of warp, how much of a bend or whatever, and how much horizontal or vertical distortion that you want as well. But what we're going to focus on this time is this little guy, which is the character and paragraph panels. So once you have a font in there and you click on this little file folder button, the character panel appears. And here are where you're going to get into your typography-ish stuff. And so we've got our font size. And then this here is the leading. And leading is really just the desktop publisher's term for line spacing. And it's not like single or double. It's in points. So it's like the font size, but it's how much of that font size between lines. So if I point here and make it smaller, so like 3 points, the letters are like overlapping each other. And it's an 80-point font, so it's going to be closer to 80 to get them to where they're not touching. All right, so like right here, 70. So this is probably a good, distance, but probably the default was going to be at around 80. So you can adjust that, or if you want them to be farther apart, you can do that there. That's called leading. It looks like leading, but it is pronounced leading. Here are the next two buttons. The first one, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. This first one is the kerning, and kerning is letter spacing. We would call it letter spacing in, say, web design or in Word. But kerning is the letter spacing between a pair of letters. So between my T and my Y, I can kern negatively, which makes them closer together. So the T comes over the top of the Y. Or I can kern positively, which would space them out. Okay, spacing out looks kind of weird. I'm going to go ahead and just kern that one negatively. Now this little button here, I'm going to select the whole word. Again, I can press Control-A, or if it's just one word, you can double click. Tracking is basically just like kerning, except it does it to all the letters. So like if you have all of them selected, see this grays out, you can't use it. So tracking would do it for all of the selected letters. So that's making an adjustment there. And again, you can track negatively or you can track positively. Okay, now I suggest you never use these two buttons, but this is vertical and horizontal scale adjustment. Think of them as Laffy Taffy is what I call it. This stretches and this stretches, and I hate these. So keep these at 100. Here's the reality, okay? If you want to stretch them, then just click on the box, press Control-T, and stretch them. And then you can just control that way without messing with these numbers. But I never really mess with these numbers. I don't like them because they stick when you get ready to make the next box and it's confusing. This last little one here is baseline shift. And this is where if you select a letter or a group of letters, you can shift the baseline. So they all sit on this little line. This Y is sitting technically on a line. So this baseline shifts it up. Or if I choose it, I can go backwards. A negative baseline shift shifts it down. And you can kind of make it all kind of crazy. And then, of course, here's your color box, bold, italics. They call these faux bold and faux italics because if the font has a real bold, it'll be up here, or a real italic, it'll be up here, for whatever reason. This is all capitals, which makes every letter a capital letter. This is small capitals, which keeps capital letters normal and makes lowercase letters baby capitals. So they're still capitals, they're just not as tall. And then you've got your superscript and subscript. And superscript, of course, is the one that flies high like Superman, but it also makes it smaller. So notice how that hey is smaller than the yay. Superscript and subscript, unlike a baseline shift, also make the font smaller. So just be aware of that. And then you have underline and strike through. And so that's pretty much the character panel. As with anything like shapes and so forth, you can use your color and swatches to modify colors. You can also use the styles panel under Windows Styles and apply styles to your font. So whatever you're clicked on, it'll take that style and apply it to that particular text block. So those options are always still there. But some of the more creative font things that I want to show you, at least one of those, is how to put text on a path. Now, when we've drawn shapes in the past, our shapes have been shapes. And what I mean by that is, when I draw a shape, let me click on my top layer, it has color to it, and it's an actual shape, and I can take my move tool and I can move it around, right? Well, up here on the options bar, you can choose things other than shape, and the other option is path. And what a path does is it creates a non-filled shape that's not really there. So watch, when we draw shapes, it makes a new layer. If I draw a path, it doesn't make a new layer. It's really nowhere, but it is somewhere. Technically, it's in the Paths panel, which docks with your Layers panel. You just have to click it. And you can see here is my work path. Now, shapes have a path too, but they're filled in. And a work path, it just happens to be a shape that's drawn only as a path. Now, you can attach text to a work path without having to see that path. So let me zoom up here so you can see what the cursor changes to. When I click on the Type tool, and I point to this line, notice how it goes from this to this. There's like a line through it. Now, if you have it on center, it's going to go to the center point of the path, so you might want to click around the center of the path. So I'm going to click here. Now, when it starts typing, there's kind of no telling where it's going to go. I'm going to type my name. Okay, that's looking great, right? You can see where kerning and tracking might be really important whenever you're on paths. Now I'm going to press Control-A to select all the letters. I'm going to scale this down so I can actually see what's going on here with these letters. Okay, so we can see now that the letters are actually inside the path. That's not where I want them. Also, notice how they are like sticking off of the path. That's because of that baseline shift. So again, I'm going to click back in here and select all, and I'm going to remove that baseline shift. I'm going to put it at 0 so that hopefully now they're sitting on the baseline of the path. See that? All right, the next thing that you can do is below the Type tool, the next button, there's a Path Selection tool and a Direct Selection tool. And when you click on the Path Selection tool, you can point to your text that's on the path and just get this funny little arrow and just pull up to modify where this is on the path. So I can pull inside the path or outside the path, and I can pull along the path using that little tool there. Very handy. There's sometimes that you draw, you put your font on the path and you can't see all the letters, but you know they're there, and you can get to the end point of the path and you can just pull to change those endpoints. Here you go. Here's where the endpoint is. It's kind of hard to see because since I have mine on center, it looks different. If you have it on left, which is kind of what I suggest sometimes when you're on path, you can kind of find the ends better because your words are going to be usually close to the end. See here, this is the beginning of the path. There's a black arrow, and then I can change where it starts. See how that's moving? So if I have it on left justified, then I'm actually moving it along. Oh, I kind of just went crazy there, but there, along the path. Okay? So that is how you can do text on a path using a shape path. So that's the easiest way. There is a tool over here called the pen tool. A lot of people don't like the pen tool, and I'm clicking off the text just so it's not confused. Here, this is the pen tool. The pen tool can also draw paths. A zigzag path is really easy to draw. It's kind of like a dot to dot. You're like click, 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 and it'll draw your path. Now, if you've got it set to draw shapes, then your thing is filled in. I don't have mine set to draw shapes, so I'm not really sure why it's drawing a shape right now, but probably because I was clicked on a shape layer. So let me undo out of that. Back up here in my history, window history. It is kind of weird about how it is with shapes. So there we go. So now I'm all the way back. Let me get on a layer that's nothing related to that at all, because it doesn't need a layer to draw a path. Okay, there we go. So now I've created a path, and I'm just going to press escape there. And then I can take my type tool, click on here, and again, start typing my name on that path. Pen path is easy to do as long as you're not like getting in the middle of another shape. You can also like click off of current paths so you don't accidentally start like joining into paths before you draw a path. Now pen will also let you draw curves. So like you click one time and then you let go. And I'm going to click over here, but I'm not going to let go. And I'm just dragging. Now that thing that you see up there, it's like a seesaw. See the seesaw? Those are handles. Those aren't really the path. The path is that line between the two dots. So I'm just making an arc basically. And then I can let go. I'm done with my path. You just hit escape. And then now I can click on this little arcy path and type my name. And see, it's not all showing up because the font's too big. So I'm going to Control A. And then I can bring up my character panel and change this tracking problem or whatever else I want to do. Okay. So the pen tool is a way, and the pen tool takes a lot of practice. The last way is a way that we discussed in class, which is using a brush or something else to create a path. So I'm going to click here to create a new layer. I'm going to call it brush path. Now brushes don't create paths. Brushes just brush stuff on, right? So if I click on here, I'm just going to draw something. So I'm just going to draw this path here. Okay, so it's not really a path, it's a brush, right? And it's not going to show up in here because it's not a path. It's just a brush. However, I can turn it into a path. So first you have to select it. And if you press Control and you click on the thumbnail, that's this thing right here, that selects it. It puts these little ants on here, the marching ants as they call it. Now, if you need the marching ants to go away, just press Control D to deselect. But in this case, it's the only thing on the layer. So once I press Control and click on here, it selects that path, or that brush rather. I'm going to turn it to a path in the Paths panel. So click on the Paths panel and then come all the way to the bottom, the middle, and it says to make a work path from the selection. And so at this point, it's going to turn from marching ants. Watch. Click. And now, see, it's an actual path. It's not marching ants anymore. So now I can take my type tool, I can click on the line, and I can type my name, which I'm getting a little bit tired of looking at this point. I'm going to hit OK here. Now, back on my layers panel, what I'm going to want to do is turn off this brush path. I don't want to look at that. And then I take that black arrow again and just move my points. Now, look, I pulled the ending point instead of the beginning point. So I got them kind of all out of whack. But you just kind of move these along until you get it where you want it. There we go, on the path. And then again, I'd switch back to my type tool, Control A after I click in there, and then I can modify anything else that I need to modify. And this one I would need to do some work at, you know, maybe do a little bit of kerning adjustment between letters that aren't working out and that sort of thing. But anyway, all right, well, that's kind of a basic rundown on typography. Remember that letters can be transformed, but not exactly like shapes can be. When you press Control T and you right-click, you do have different options. So you can skew your letters. You can do other options too under Control T, like warp. So just understand that you can change, well, you can't really warp it because it's got its own warp when you're in the type mode. But you can change how they look, and you can still rotate with Control T as well with text. So you're not totally limited in just letters and paths. All right, well, good luck with typography.